Okay, hello, I'm Aaron Stump, and I'm here with a bunch of friends here at the University of Iowa. We are going to talk about optimal beta reduction, and I'm giving a lecture about this because as a teacher, when you're a programmer, you learn what something is by programming it up. And at some point I transitioned from being a programmer to being a professor, but now I learn something by explaining it to other people. So I'm going to try to increase my knowledge of this quite complicated subject of optimal beta reduction by giving an hour lecture about it or so. And my source for this, which I have here, is this amazing book. So thank you very much to Asperti and Guerrini for this incredible book on the optimal implementation of functional programming languages. I was not even aware of this book until I started getting into this topic a little bit, but this is a great resource. And there's been a lot of work, actually, even by some of the authors of that book since the book was published. I mean, this is from, I don't see the date here, but I've got the hard copy and can tell you. It's, yeah, this is from the late 90s. This is 1998. So there's been a bunch of results since then. But still, this covers the core part of it. And I'm going to try to explain some of it to you as I figure it out myself. So, so basically the problem kind of comes from this fact that I did not look up, but is attributed, I've seen citations to Barendrecht chapter 13. I didn't manage to look at that before this discussion. That there is no recursive optimal reduction strategy for beta reduction. Now, we could probably, if I dig a little more into that, to understand what that's saying, but it means that there's no strategy, no computable strategy you can come up with that is guaranteed to give you the shortest reduction sequence to a normal form if the term has a normal form. So what's optimal here, and again, I didn't check Barendrecht definition, so I hope I have this right. This is intuitively, makes sense. Shortest reduction sequence to normal form. To a normal form. If it has a normal form, of course. If there is one. And in this Asperti-Guerrini book, they give an example that they attribute to Levy, and I don't know where, they didn't actually give a citation to Levy's work. It might be from his French dissertation. So this is Jean-Jacques Levy, who did a dissertation that basically laid the theoretical foundations for what we're going to talk about. So this is an example from this Asperti-Guerrini book. I should probably abbreviate that in this, attributed to Levy. That's supposed to show an example family of terms where, depending on certain parameters, one reduction strategy or another is better. Okay, and it's kind of a cool example, although I found I had some questions about it, but I want to show it anyway. Okay, so the example, all right, so example family of terms where different terms in the family have different different reduction strategies are preferable. Different strategies give the optimal reduction. And so here is here's some definitions for this family of terms. Delta n, like n-fold duplicator is lambda x, and just apply x to itself n times. Okay. Then there's a term f sub n, which is lambda x xi, and then n x's. Okay. There's a couple more of these. The definition makes, I mean, it's, no doubt you could find something shorter, but this isn't actually so bad, really. This g sub n, you apply this n-fold duplicator to y applied to some free variable z there.
What is the I in the Fn?
Oh, sorry. The I is just lambda xx.
Oh, I didn't.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Yeah, I is lambda xx. And then gn prime is lambda y. Is basically just the one-step beta reduct of gn. So you just duplicate yz n times. Okay, so now let's see so these are some sort of preliminary definitions that we need, and then maybe I'll shrink them a little bit so I can try to fit the example. So then what the example term is, if you apply fm to gn, what can happen? Well, if you do this outer reducts first, so you've got you have to put gn down m times. So you have gn I, and then you've got m of these. Okay, we're going to have two parameters, m and n here, and depending on what m and n are, we're going to have two reduction sequences. One that's going to go off this way, and one's going to go left to the left and up to the right. And depending on what the parameters are, going left is better or going right is better. And so, okay, and this one, now the redux, I'm underlining my reduxes, of course. Here, gn of I, we've got this n-fold duplicator applied to iz, and then we've got gn still over here m times. And of course you could just reduce that. Now this is a question I'm going to have. They said in their book, Asperti and Guerrini, I think actually there's some typo or something about, they describe the left side and the right side, but they seem to have their terms switched, and they say one uses innermost and one uses outermost reduction. We'll come back to that in a second. Let's see. And then finally you use this duplicator. Okay. And so you reduce this, and you get your nz's over here, n of these, and you've got m still of these gn's, but gn, if we go back to the sort of legend up here, gn in one step reduces to gn prime. So basically this little pile up of gn's, if you reduce them all, you have to take m steps there to do that. You just reduce them all to one step that they go, and you've got gn prime, and there's m of those. M of those and nz's, okay? Sorry, it's not quite fitting on one screen there. Now let's look at the other path. The other path says, why don't you just do that reduction of gn right up front? So just do that, okay? And now do your fm reduction. So fm again basically just sprinkles the gn prime, and there's an I, and then there's a bunch more gn primes. Okay, so there's m of those. And now if you do this redux here with the gn prime I, so now you'll get iz. You'll get a big pile up of iz's. iz. And there's n of those, okay? And you still got these m gn primes over here. Okay, and finally, if you now just reduce all of those, in any order you like, So you could take n steps to get down here to the bottom. And so the point of this example, so we've reached the same results. We've reached the same normal form. I mean, lambda calculus is confluence, so we took two paths to a normal form. They had to be the same normal form. But if you look at the lengths of these, so this side we have 1, 2, 3, 4 plus m. So this is length, m plus 4. And over here it's 1, 2, 3, and then n. So this is, n plus 3. And now, so this is supposed to show you that depending on what the parameters are, it would be better to take the one path or the other path. And let's see, they say here in the book, which I have before me, they say the sequence on the left-hand side, and I assure you, faithfully copied their reduction sequence here. So what they're saying is the left is really the left on my screen. They say the reduction on the sequence on the left-hand side, whose length is n plus 3, which it manifestly is not. So I think they meant the other side. But they say it's a typical innermost reduction. So I think my best interpretation is that they've scrambled left and right, and so that this side over here, because this one on the left, if you ask which is innermost and which is outermost, this one on the left, you're doing this redex, this FMGN, the outer redex first. So that would be an outermost, this is an outermost step. Outermost. This step is outermost. And this one is also outermost. I mean, if you're doing leftmost, outermost. I mean, now there'd be you would have some choice, but let's say you're doing leftmost, outermost. Then you get to here. But now this step right here is not a leftmost, outermost step. So I don't really know what they're thinking. I mean, this one that's not. Because your delta n redex could fire there. If you were leftmost, outermost, that's the one you would do. And then you would duplicate this IZ redex a bunch of times. And so this, I don't really understand. So it sort of seemed like a cool example, but the point about sort of like, oh, look, innermost sometimes, outermost other times, it doesn't quite fit because this is not an outermost step there. So leftmost, outermost step. So I don't understand that. I don't know if anybody sees anything that I might have missed. I mean, this one over here, you could say, is innermost. I mean, this is innermost.
You said this side, the left?
Yeah.
M plus 4.
M plus 4. Because at the end, you do M reductions to get rid of these GNs.
Yes. But if you add one more, just n plus 5, and you reduce the delta n.
Yeah, but if you do the delta n first, you're going to duplicate IZ. And then it would be like, 4 plus n plus m, and then there would be no question. It would definitely be better to do the other side. 4 plus n plus m is going to be bigger than n plus 3. So that's why I didn't understand their example a little bit there. But this one is innermost, this step you could say is innermost because you do, no, that's right. That's all you have to do to go from there to there. That's the only redex you have there. And this one, the same. This is also innermost. That's fine. And then these are now innermost as well. So I do agree with them that the right sequence is innermost, but it seems like the left one is not strictly leftmost, outermost. So this I don't understand. But I thought it was kind of a cool example anyway. Maybe with some tweaks we could get something that fit exactly what they were saying. Okay, so anyway, this is supposed to be an example showing that kind of giving some intuition that there cannot be an optimal strategy. We have to go look. I saw a good point made, which is that I forgot what paper this was, but say you have a term t that has a normal form, and there's a whole literature on this. There's like these things called, they talk about needed reductions. I don't know what some of that stuff is, but it's a pretty easy observation to say that if T has a normal form, or I guess maybe it would be better to say it like this. There is an optimal strategy for normalizing terms. And if this is not obvious to you, that's just because you have to think about it for just a second more, because it's actually a very easy observation. So this thing where there is a recursive optimal strategy for normalizing terms.
What is that recursive part?
Meaning computable. Meaning, there's always a recursive strategy sort of declaratively, mathematically. You just say, the next thing you should reduce is the one that would get you there faster. But which redex is that? It's not computable to figure out what it is in general, but if you have normalizing terms, it's very easy. What do? You just take a term t, take a normalizing term t. So this is so simple, it's hardly deserves a proof, but take normalizing t and enumerate all reduction sequences in parallel. In parallel, then the strategy, you want me to formalize a strategy is just a function from terms to terms, or something, or from terms to redexes, or something like that, to pick for you in a term, what's the next redex I should do. And so then for your strategy, you choose the first redex on the shortest path. I mean, goodness, it seems like completely cheating. And of course, the hidden in here, the reason why do we need to know it's normalizing? We need to know there is a shortest path, and that we will find one in some finite amount of time. So because normalizing, we're guaranteed to find this. Because in the worst case, the leftmost outermost reduction sequence will take you to the normal form. We know that's true of any normalizing term. The leftmost reduction will take you there. And so you're guaranteed to find some finite reduction to a normal form. And now just look at, and then so as you enumerate all of them, you're going to at some point find a shortest one. It might be the leftmost, maybe it's shorter than that by some good luck. But you're definitely going to find one of them, and that's how you know which redex to take. So you're guaranteed to find some, and hence some shortest. Path to a normal form. Okay. All right, very trivial. But of course, that would not be a good way to implement reduction for lambda calculus, right? That's of course terrible, and it also it's limited to just normalizing terms, which for type theory, not the deal since we're not normalizing. But for some type theories that would maybe be okay. But you cannot. This crude proof does not suggest any efficient algorithm. So in the 70s. So let's talk about the optimal beta reduction. So in the 1970s, Jean-Jacques Levy, he studied the theory of optimal parallel beta reduction. So while we cannot have sequential reduction that reduces a single redex at a time, there is a sense in his work, which I myself have not yet studied in any detail, that we could have an optimal parallel reduction. Okay, so this is, to dig in would be work for another day. Might be worth doing. since this lays the foundation for this other stuff. But it was only in 1990, so quite some gap later, that someone actually proposed a way to implement optimal parallel reduction. And this was John Lamping, who was at Xerox PARC at the time. And I'm actually feeling, I interned at Xerox PARC when I was in an undergrad in the mid-90s, so it's possible that I overlapped with Dr. Lamping there, but I didn't know anything about lens calculus then, so I wouldn't have gotten anything out of it. Proposed a way to implement this. To implement optimal parallel beta reduction. And that's what I want to tell you a little bit about. And I'm not sure, I mean, I can actually introduce some of the basics now and then maybe one more time, I don't know, for more of it. And so the basic idea is it's a graph rewriting formalism for, and this is sort of makes sense. And in fact, if you didn't, at first you think, yeah, of course, graph rewriting, I know about that. I mean, really, you make so much hay out of this? Graph rewriting, it means we share pointers to things. What's the problem? Yeah, that, apparently this idea is attributed to Wadsworth in the, let me find here, in the Asperti book where they talk about this. Asperti and Guerrini book, sorry. Yeah, in 1971. So you think, we've gone backwards. The solution was long ago, even before we knew there was a problem. And that is to, implement beta reduction on DAG representation, directed acyclic graph representation of lambda terms. Okay, so so here they have a little example. I will just to make the sort of show the main point. So say you're going to reduce okay, they say, what if you're going to reduce lambda x applied to x, applied to lambda x applied to y, applied to I, where again I is just lambda xx. Okay, so let's write it as a little graph here. So you'll have your lambda x, apply x to x, and now you have another lambda x, apply x to y, and apply that to this I. Okay, so let's see here. Yeah, they say what we're going to do is, well, you have a beta redex, and in these graph formalisms, one convention I saw was that you sort of highlight this link to show which redex you're doing. So if we do this redex, the idea is that when you do a beta reduction, you don't copy the argument for each occurrence of x, you just make pointers to the argument. So that means that you'll take this application, this one, and put it here, okay? And then you just have two pointers to the same lambda term, which is this argument. And now if you do, let's see, if you now do this redex over here, you'll be left with, so this part up here, this context will stay the same, and you will have, this at is this one now, and you'll have I applied to y, and then you reduce that guy, and you have this structure representing y applied to y. Sorry, I'm not being very consistent about putting arrows or not putting arrows on my graph links here. And so this, let's see, so what we did, we first reduced this outer guy, and if you just reduced it, so let's see if this actually does get you something. So you would take this, term over here, and you have to apply it to itself. So you'd have to say, I applied to itself. Okay, so I'm saying if you just did sort of regular sequential beta reduction with no sharing of any kind, you would duplicate this, and now to get down to your normal form, now you have to start picking redexes like, oh, okay, let's do this one. Sure, we get IY over here, applied to this other guy. And now we maybe want to do that one. And so we get IY, IY. And now you can see, we're redoing a bunch of work that we didn't need to do if we did things somehow in a sharing way. And we reduce this one. So, we did sort of, below here we have kind of, 1, 2, 3 steps on the graph representation, and above we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps where we aren't keeping track of the sharing. So clearly that's definitely a win to do it that way. The problem is, though, you need to copy lambda terms. And I think, now I'd like to try to see if I can have a small, simple example of this. So this is the downside of this algorithm. You really have to, so this is not optimal, because you may be forced to copy some redexes. As you make copy a redex. The goal in optimal beta reduction is that you never redo work. That's kind of the slogan. So you should never copy a redex. And even worse, you should never copy something that could later turn into a redex. They call these virtual redexes here in this book. So if you have a variable applied to something, you should never copy that, because you might substitute something for that variable and a redex might appear. And so you would have in effect copied a redex. Okay, so amazingly, you can actually implement this where you never copy either a real redex or something that might later turn into a redex. It's incredible. But let's just sort of see, if we had, say we had a similar example, probably just picking a different reduction strategy with that example would give you the problem as well. But let's again have a duplicator here, this duplicator term, and let's just say we apply it to I. Okay, so if we do this redex, and we get, now with this pointer sharing thing, we're supposed to get I applied to I. And now at this point, though, to do the next beta step, we basically do need to do a copy. Now, this isn't maybe the most, enlightening example of that, but we've got to copy this because, the plan is to take the argument and substitute it in for the variable. But if you substitute it into literally the same piece of shared graph, that's going to be, you're going to screw things up. Now in this case, I don't know if that so you basically are forced to do a copy here, and then you can finally do your reduction. And so in a sense, and in this case, I think you actually do need to do this copy sort of in general. But one way to summarize what Lamping's algorithm does, the basic idea behind it, is to do lazy copying of lambda terms. I'm sorry, I wish I had a little better example that showed you just how badly things would go, if you didn't copy in this kind of case. But I don't have one right off the top of my head. I mean, actually, you know what? I think maybe I could come up with one. So let's say we had something just a tiny bit different. If this doesn't work, sorry. But say you have, instead of just xx, let's say you have x applied to y over here, but over here you've got x applied to z. Okay, and then you apply this to I. And actually, maybe I is not the best choice either. Let's see if we can put something a little more. Let's just say it's again another kind of duplicating guy. So y applied to y. Okay, so if you do this outer one, what you're supposed to get is you have an application, another application. Now this, we're going to have a shared graph here. So we're going to have lambda y, apply y, y. And then here there's a different y. And then we have the same guy. Yeah, this I think shows the point. You can't just, if you just say, oh, look, I want to do, say you're saying I want to do, and here's a problem with that convention of drawing, making the arrow bold. You have a long arrow. Okay, there we go. So you say, I want to do this redux. Imagine that you just said, okay, I know what I'm supposed to do. So this is wrong. We're not supposed to do it this way. So unsound, but just to show the point of it. So you say, yeah, I need to take this x and copy it in for y. So in that shared graph without doing anything else. So then what you're going to have is you're going to have lambda y, y, and you've put, oops, sorry. Wait a sec. No, my bad. Back up. You have, you're just going to have apply, and you just point to this x from two different places. But now over here, I mean, in a sense, this just doesn't make sense because like this here is now dangling. Where does that even go? I mean, you sort of destroyed you basically destroyed the lambda abstraction node, but yet you still have a pointer going to it. So that just doesn't make sense. So you have to copy. That's where you need to copy this. And if you had a redux buried in there, you'd be forced to copy that redux. Okay. So does anyone want to ask me anything? Okay. So again, this sort of lazy copying, and this just gets quite intricate, and surprisingly so. So Lamping's algorithm, where again, my read on it is that it's lazy copying, and it's more aggressive graph sharing. And this is a part I think any computer scientist could appreciate, not even just a lambda calculus, student of lambda calculus. Because graph sharing, that sounds like a pretty generic thing to want to do. So let me give you the basic idea. And in all the presentations of this stuff that I've seen, they always present the basic idea first, and then they explain to you why it's not good enough, and then they present the much more complicated idea. So, but it's definitely makes sense to present the basic idea first. Okay, so the first thing is the basic graph representation is going to be a little bit different than what we just saw. And you use an explicit graph node for duplicating, when there's a node for duplication. You don't just have a bunch of pointers going to the same subgraph. You have an explicit node that sort of mediates that. And so just one occurrence, I'm sorry, let me say, there's just going to be one edge per bound variable, because you're going to use the sharing node for duplication of that variable. So, for example, let's say we wanted to do lambda x applied to x. This is going to get turned into the following graph. You have a lambda node, and this lambda node has two outgoing edges. One is for the body, and the other is for the variable, of course. And so we have an application node, but now since we're both going to x, now they don't both point to x, because basically the plan is to have an edge from where this bound variable, from the binding site to the use site. Now we don't, would you split it, have your edge fork to the two use sites or something? It's not an edge anymore in the traditional sense. So you put a sharing node here, which is like this. It's a, sorry for the wiggle there. It's a fan out edge, a fan out node. Okay, and you actually label, and traditionally it seems that you put a little circle on one of these and a little star on the other one, and we'll see why you do that. Okay, so far that doesn't look too shocking. Let's see. They have examples here that go through figures and figures and figures to show what happens, so it might be nice to have something a little smaller. So let's say, to try to show this, in Lamping's paper, it's quite a paper for, most of the paper is a walkthrough of one reduction sequence to try to explain to you what the heck is going on. Let's try to say that we have, let's say we have this applied to lambda y, and let's give ourselves some kind of redex here so we can see that it doesn't get duplicated. And actually, it might be better, maybe this is why their examples get so long. This subject seems to be full of pretty tricky examples, not so much tricky, but long examples to show the various phenomenon that you have to consider. So let me put, I think I'll have this x applied to I over here. Okay, so in the graph representation, this Lamping's sharing graph representation, let's see if we can figure out what this is going to look like. So I have an at over here. The body of this is an at, where we have, okay, so there's this structure, there's an I over here, and now these are both x, and so we need to use one of these fan out nodes and connect that up here, okay? And then the other one, let's see, it's another lambda. I've also got sharing here, so we're going to apply I to, and now these guys go to another fan out. Okay, so there we go. All right, now let's try to see what happens. Now remember, our goal here for optimal beta reduction, we want to reduce these graphs, and we do not want to reduce that I applied to Y read X more than once. We want to just reduce it one time. Okay, so what do? You start off similarly to the sort of Wadsworth version of this. Let's do this rate of read X. So we're going to have, and I'll try to show again where things are coming from. I'm saving it, so that would have been a good idea earlier. Okay. Okay, so there's that guy. And okay, so now we have this sharing graph. Now the great thing is you really just change a pointer. I mean, you just have to say, all right, where we had this pointer from the lambda over to here, now we just need to redirect that edge to our argument. Let's see, so I have this, that, and I, and then right here, this used to go to the binding site, this little dongle I've just drawn at the bottom here, this used to go to the binding site, but now we're rerouting it to point to the argument, and we can just draw the argument down here. We don't have to draw it off to the right anymore if we don't want to. And so we come in here to a fan out. Okay, we're just about to the exciting part, so if you're sort of wondering when it's going to get more exciting, it's coming. Okay, so now what we want to do, I don't think we, let's do this out of read X up, actually either one of these. Now you see, if we want to do this, there's a lambda down here. Down here we've got this lambda abstraction, and it's getting applied in a couple of places thanks to this fan out. I mean, really, we've got it being applied here, and then we're also applying it here. And this is a case where we are just going to be forced to duplicate that lambda, but we're going to do it lazily. This is the amazing part. Now, how do you do it lazily? This is the brilliance of, the first piece of brilliance of what lamping did. So we're going to permute this lambda over the fan out. This is the first thing we do that's like not just what you kind of intuitively would imagine. Oh yeah, graph reduction, sure, I know how to do that. I can assure you don't know how to do this if you haven't studied it. What we're going to do is we're going to initiate a lazy copy of that lambda abstraction. And so it says, well, we're going to start copying. So we're going to have one lambda up here. Okay, let me keep consulting my notes so I don't screw up. We're going to copy the lambdas. So, but just the lambda node itself. We're not copying the whole body because we want to avoid that. But we really are forced to copy this lambda, so we have to do that. And that means that the bodies now go to this fan out, and that part all still stays the same. So we have, oops, I'm sorry. We have, now I was showing, this piece here is what's here, because we've sort of permuted the lambda over that guy, over that fan out. So we have at, and this fan out is still there. Sorry, I need a little more space there. I, and this. But now look, this is the part when I first saw this, and when I finally understood what the heck was going on, I thought, this is pretty freaking brilliant, because we're trying to share, this piece of subgraph over here, we're trying to share it. But we're trying to share it lazily where we've been forced to start splitting it up and copying it. So what we basically want to say is, you start with two lambdas, you come to the shared graph, but then you fork out in two different ways. And so you have a fan out. And so right here, so at this point down here, I'm sorry, this is the only thing I have to keep putting some notations here so you can see what I'm referring to. So right here, where I just drew that green arrow, that is where the lambda bound variable used to be. But now we forked. We have two lambdas, So where are their bound variables going to go? Well, they're going to go to another node that's sort of it's the fan in. So they're going to go, let's see, I've drawn them kind of backwards here. Oh, they have to get drawn backwards because it's upside down. It's pretty important to keep track of you see I have a star and a circle now. It's the variable, okay, so up here at this lambda node that I just circled, the body is going through the circle port of this fan out. And so we're sort of saying, this lambda starts here and then it goes into this shared subgraph, but eventually the shared subgraph, you split out of the shared subgraph. You fan out with this fan out that I just drew down here. This is the fan out. And the edge you want there is the one that corresponds to the circle node, and that comes back up to the binding site for this lambda. And the other lambda similarly is going through the star fan in port, and it matches up to the star fan out port. Okay, so basically what we've done is we had this, you've got a lambda and then some blob over here. And we've split it, and we had some fan out above here. What we've done sort of abstractly is to take this, duplicate just the lambda node, push that fan out beneath them. So all the sort of connections here have been sort of properly accounted for. Oops, now this is, just a second. Sorry. Okay, so the body is going here, but the uses of these variables are coming to this sort of dual fan out. And then your blob, so right here, we had this, what looks like a sweet potato that I drew, and that's connected right there. Okay, so you're sharing, you're sharing a graph, partially with these fan ins and fan outs. And so this is kind of letting you lazily duplicate this thing. Lazily duplicating. The lambda term. Okay. So that's the basic idea. It's more than just sharing a common subgraph. It's like kind of finding a piece of the common subgraph that still makes sense, even as you sort of tried to split things. And it's kind of. I admit, when I first saw this, I was thinking about tries, which I like this trie data structure. When I teach tries in undergrad class, you're always saying, well, tries let you share common prefixes. So you have, like, if you had cat and catch, for example, so you had a trie that was mapping cat to 1 and catch to 2. That's great. You could share the common prefix, cat and catch. But in these representations, you can't share, common suffixes or common strings in the middle or anything like that. Basically, this is giving you, for a graph, not just a string, a way to share interior parts of it. So, sort of fanning in and fanning out. I didn't bother to try to think, what would that, so let's say you want to add rat to this. Let's say you're saying, oh, I want to add rat. Well, normally you just make another branch off of there. But imagine you could say, okay, I've got an R, and then, I don't know what you're saying. You're saying kind of like, coming over here on port, circle, I've got A, T, or let's say I have rats. So then I can say, oh, and then port circle, you fork off with an S, and you get to something else, 3. So letting you share interior pieces of your trie, which would be, I mean, maybe people have tried to figure out such a data structure for strings, but this is way beyond that, because this is for not arbitrary, it's for graphs, it's for lambda calculus graphs. So I think that's almost everything I want to say for the moment, except, well, okay, what would be nice to show you is that you can still have some problems if you're not, but this is, just what we said here is not sound. There's more you have to do, and the basic problem comes to around when you, in a sense, you can think of these pairs, like here we have a pair of matching fan in and fan out, okay? And in a sense, they represent the sort of bracketing of a subterm for which we're trying to do lazy copying. But what happens if there are more of these fan in and fan outs in play, and what happens if they overlap? And this can happen. So it can happen, and I'm sorry I don't have the handy simplest example to show this. It can happen that you have sort of one pair, matching pair, and there's some piece of graph, but yet inside it, there is a different matching pair due to beta reduction, because remember, we're trying to be lazy. So even though we forked off this, we split these lambdas out here, we might now do some reductions and copy in new subgraphs for one of these pointers, And so it's not like we're just going to duplicate that shared subgraph in the middle and be done with it. We're going to keep around these delimiters for where we should do the duplicating, and it can happen that you get kind of like overlapping pieces where you have, these are match up and these other ones match up, and they have to sort of pass through each other. And so basically, the basic problem that, so I've sort of showed you the essence of the simple version of Lamping's algorithm, which is not sound in general, although it's sound in like some limited cases, apparently. Depending on usage of variables, it may be sound. But we basically have kind of a critical pair. If you see this, so say you have a graph layering rule. If you see this, you should just connect up these edges. That's one thing you could do. Is just say, okay, that just goes to 2 edges. This is how they draw these kind of things. There's sort of a, implicitly we're basically saying connect these two where I'm drawing these dotted lines. That's one thing you can do, but there's another thing you might have to do, because if you did that in this case I showed here, like if the blue one meets the green one, you actually don't want them to cancel. They don't match up. You need to permute it past itself. You need to permute them past each other. And so in that case you would get, let's see, this comes here. I'm not sure I'm going to manage. I think I might have to write this one up, I'm sorry. Yeah, okay. So you just you duplicate the 2 of these, and you connect them like this. Let's see. Now here it's drawn. These guys kind of cross.
Sorry, what are the blue dotted lines?
The blue dotted lines are just a comment to try to say that in this rewrite rule I've drawn, whose arrow I'm just indicating now, it's saying the meaning of that rule is to connect the top little bit of graph where I've put the dotted blue lines connected to the bottom bit. So when you say this rewrites to just 2 lines, like what does that mean? If you're not used to a graph writing formalism, you don't understand. There's like an implicitly they're saying, this is edge A, B, C, and D, and this rule is saying connect A and C, and connect B and D. Okay, you just connect those links. So basically, but the basic problem is you don't know, and I'm sorry I didn't manage to come up with an easy example to show where this can happen, where you get this kind of overlapping of these fans, and there's a critical pair here. You don't know, should I cancel these things? Where this fan in meets the fan out, is that showing that lazy duplication has ended? We're done now, we just get rid of it? Or am I supposed to permute them past each other? And the intricacy of the next part of Lamping's algorithm, which I would like to tell you about next week, is in putting machinery in there to make sure you know which of these two you're supposed to do. And the machinery is tricky, and it's related to the comonad of linear logic, the exponential comonad of linear logic. There's a lot of categorical connection apparently here in this realm, but that's a bit beyond me, I'm afraid. Asperti on his webpage has a great, since I just show this and then be done. Okay, I won't show it. Sorry. Anyway, he's got this Venn diagram depicting his research areas, like domain theory, category theory. So he started with this, and then he's moved from like to like lambda calculus and blah blah blah. Now he's doing like deep learning, but he's sort of, it's I don't know. It's cool to see. He has a justified intellectual progression there. So anyway, so I've sort of given you a taste of the basic algorithm where we lazily duplicate these lambda terms. And next time, I'll try to show you the fancy twists that are necessary to resolve this critical pair. And with that, I'm pretty much ready to be done, unless anyone wants to ask me something on tape here.
What are the high-level properties of this reduction? So
that's a great question.
All the machinery in place, then
once you get all the machinery in place, okay, yes. Okay, actually, I should have said this at the beginning. And even the motivation. So why am I intensively studying this? I'm intensively studying this because our friend Victor Maya at Ethereum Foundation wants to hard fork Ethereum to base it on this, or to base it on some version of this. And his motivation, as I've understood it from talking to him, is that optimal beta reduction provides it's a graph rewriting formalism, so each step is constant time. I mean, you're just rewiring some links. And so this can be implemented very efficiently, but with a very sort of sensible cost model. You know how much it's going to cost to do these things. Whereas with beta reduction in general, finding a good cost model for beta reduction was a matter of many years of research, and there's this matter of duplicating terms and all this kind of thing. It's hard to say. In something like Ethereum, you're billing people for computation.
You're talking about gas.
Gas, yes, yes.
To build people.
You will build per graph rewrite, yes, instead of billing per some other stuff. But you can't really build for per beta reduction step, because the costs vary wildly depending on what's going on. The costs are very controlled, and it's optimal, and you can find examples. I sent an email to a friend in programming languages to ask about, when I was first hearing about this stuff from Victor, like, what the heck is this? I've never heard of any of this. And Haskell and OCaml, lots of functional languages, Racket, all these ones, implement, some pretty advanced algorithms to try to get efficient reduction of, lambda calculus terms plus maybe primitive data types and scalars and stuff. I was like, what's the deal? I mean, so Victor says basically, and you can find tables that show this algorithm annihilating GHC, OCaml, pick your advanced functional programming implementation. This can completely destroy them, because this sharing thing can take terms that might otherwise require exponential number of steps and reduce it to linear.
But is the vice versa not true?
What? Is vice versa not true that
I mean,
some examples where it would do worse? No. I mean, it's optimal.
Slightly better.
It's optimal. It's the best. No, there are no examples where anything else does better. Now, some engineering or something like that, there may be some differences in constant factor overheads or this sort of thing, but and there's some other subtleties here because we're talking about optimal beta reduction steps, but there are these bookkeeping steps that have to move things around, and in fact, those steps can be very expensive.
Exactly. So
they can be very expensive.
So like one small
yes.
beta reduction, you're doing like a lot of bookkeeping, a lot of checks.
Yes, it can happen, but even there, the another point is, here we're talking about doing full beta reduction. We reduce inside the bodies of lambda terms, which for programming languages, you never do that. And these guys make a great case of kind of, in fact, they have Asperti and Guerrini have this little comment from a review of one of their papers that said, but we never go under lambda. It's like, but this is not sensible. I have to find exactly what it was. Oh yeah, here it says, stopping reduction under lambda makes good practical sense as it prevents problems associated with reduction of open terms. And they said, certainly, in addition, Pascal makes good practical sense as it prevents problems associated with returning functions as results. But the purpose of computer science, if any, is to study and possibly solve problems, not just prevent them, isn't it? Yes, I couldn't agree more. And so they're basically saying, and the examples they show are ones where, due to not reducing under lambda, they get much worse performance because they end up copying some closures and things are duplicated. Whereas with this, you'll never duplicate anything. So anyway, so one motivation is it might just be better. So high-level properties, optimal. That seems good. Another amazing thing is...
So was a takeaway from that with the not fully normalizing terms, sometimes this can be more expensive? Is that what you're saying? Not normalizing all the way underneath lambdas?
No. This tells you that you should reduce everywhere under lambdas. All the way. And doing that compared to stopping at lambdas, they can show cases where the cost is like exponentially worse because basically they can stop too early. If you don't reduce under lambda, there can be some redux hidden there that then gets copied a bunch of times, and then all those copies have to get reduced later.
So only strict cases, only strict evaluation, or
only strict evaluation for what?
For terms, you must evaluate all throughout the term. I mean, a lot of things are based on. Can I write lazy functions?
That's a good question, whether one still wants to apply a strategy even here, but there's no point, I guess, because that's another thing is that basically they say that now you get the diamond property. That's one other thing you get as the high level. Lambda calculus is confluent, but this thing has the diamond property. You take 2 steps out, you can take 2 steps back in to join them.
So it's very, very strict in
It's very strict, yeah. And there's also something about just a moment.
Then it explains why it's not implemented in something like Haskell, right? When you compare individual Haskell programs with it.
This is...
majority of Haskell is based on laziness. And if here your reduction strategy is so stiff as it possesses the diamond property, then I guess I think that you have a lot of you can implement functions, right, which will be defined or undefined depending on the strategy, evaluation strategy you're talking about.
Yeah, and I think the situation...
Like important programs.
I don't know if it's... I don't quite know the situation there, but I think the situation is different here. But I have to tell you more to answer this. just a second. They do talk about this question about let's see. Yeah, okay. I mean, you have to see something like, well, I want to stop, but to address this point, I mean, some terms, I think, and this is the limits of what I've understood so far, really, it can happen that, so let's try to do lambda x applied to x applied to itself. Some things have graph normal forms that wouldn't have usual normal forms. And here we're obviously not going to try to use the full machinery, so we're going to just pray that the basic machinery is enough. So here you reduce this to this fan out, and now here you have this lambda term. Now we need to do this, initiate this lazy copying. And so you would have a lambda, and now you have this at, and now you start to see oops, I'm sorry. So here, the problem of pairing these up is now important.
But this is delta delta, no?
This is delta delta. Yeah. So it could be that it just normalizes, but it doesn't normalize. You sort of kind of expect that, but you can get these shared graph representations that represent like an infinite term. Actually, so maybe not this one. This one might not be it. But things like fixed point combinators and stuff that would be like unfold to an infinite series of f's can give us a finite shared graph for that. So maybe this is not the one to show. Anyway, that's all I can manage for now. So let's stop. So the question that was left on the table was Denise's of kind of, so these guys make us claim that basically optimal reduction is better than anything because, hey, it's optimal. And Denise says, well, in Haskell, lazy evaluation is critical because you expect that some things just won't be reduced, and your behavior of your term can be totally different if you change the strategy.
Right. So the interesting example, maybe if there is something which can be actually tried, is some like this usual examples from which they use as an example for the hardware compiling, where you have defined this lazily the stream of Fibonacci, let's say that.
Yeah. So working with streams or other things like that. Sure. Yeah. So I don't know enough about this to know how this goes over for that.
And then of course the main functions where which rely on the fact where you can build these lazy channels where at the end of the channel we have some undefined.
Sure. You don't have to persuade me that laziness is a useful abstraction, but. Nowhere did I read in here any apology of kind of, oh, we're really sorry. The only bad thing is just you can't do things that you need laziness. They make no such apologies of any spirit like that. So I would assume that means the story is a little different in that. But I don't understand enough to be able to answer that. Okay, I'm going to cut off my request here.